The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. This is how the birth of Jesus Christ came about. When his mother Mary was betrothed to Joseph, but before they lived together, she was found with child through the Holy Spirit. Joseph, her husband, since he was a righteous man, yet unwilling to expose her to shame, decided to divorce her quietly. Such was his intention when, behold, the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream and said, "Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary your wife into your home, for it is through the Holy Spirit that this child has been conceived in her. She will bear a son, and you are to name him Jesus, because he will save his people from their sins." All this took place to fulfill what the Lord had said through the prophet, "Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and they shall name him Emmanuel," which means God is with us. When Joseph awoke, he did as the angel of the Lord had commanded him, and took his wife into his home. The Gospel of the Lord. There's very little known biblically about St. Joseph. Most of it actually comes from the couple of paragraphs that makes up today's Gospel. As the Gospel in St. Matthew tells us, Joseph is betrothed to Mary. They are engaged. And yet in that time and in that culture and in that place, that was the first step of marriage. And in the eyes of society, even with that betrothal or that engagement, Joseph and Mary are married. That means that they've already consented to marry. Their families have consented to marry. Each of them has brought a dowry. Joseph and Mary each brought something to the marriage that's a collective, that's theirs. And even though they don't live together yet, they're considered married. The second stage of marriage takes place months or maybe years later, just like it often does in this day and this age, this culture, where the engagement takes place first, and then the ceremony takes place, and following the wedding ceremony, then they go to live together. So in the Gospel, Joseph and Mary are considered husband and wife, even though they don't live together yet. Joseph has not yet taken her into his home. And of course, that's the ideal we get also, that they're already married, because Joseph has decided to divorce Mary quietly, it says, because Mary is found with child. So in some sense, in the eyes of society, she's broken her wedding vows, the vows that that in some sense already took place. It could have been Joseph's child, but Joseph knows that the baby inside Mary's womb is not his child. So therefore, Mary was unfaithful, is the conclusion that one has to come to. She can lie and say, "Oh, it's Joseph," or she can say, "Oh, it's the Holy Spirit's baby." Oh, that's the oldest excuse that there is, right? It's the Holy Spirit. Well, Mary's the one that invented that excuse, right? Because of her. But Joseph knows it's not his child. Joseph is a just and righteous man, is what the Gospel tells us, which means he does what is right. He follows the law of society. He follows God's laws as well. And the law says that he can, and the law says actually he should divorce Mary. That's what the law says. She's already been unfaithful. Maybe Mary has told him the story of the angel Gabriel, quite possible. Obviously, though, Joseph struggles with that story and with Mary's pregnancy, because up until he has the dream, he's intent on divorce. That's his intention. And that's the righteous and just thing for Joseph to do. That's what the law says. But Joseph is also kind and merciful. He doesn't want to expose her to public shame, is also what we hear in the Gospel. He's supposed to divorce her loudly, divorce her very publicly. And Mary's supposed to receive the punishment according to the law as well. Punishment which at least is shame and embarrassment in the eyes of society. But Joseph wants to divorce her quietly. His kindness triumphs over his righteousness and over his justice. And so he decides after the dream, he's satisfied with the message of the angel Gabriel in the dream, and he goes from the idea of divorce to marriage overnight, just with that one dream. And he takes Mary to be his wife. But Mary is going to give birth, so he takes Mary into his home after they have a ceremony. So it's not like the next day the dream happens and then there's a ceremony. So there's a little bit more time where there's a ceremony inside the temple. Joseph takes Mary into his home, and yet Mary is going to give birth less than 9 months after they've had the wedding ceremony. Society will know that that Mary was pregnant when she got married. Society is going to know that. And so in the eyes of society, in a sense, what was supposed to be Mary's shame becomes the shame of Joseph. Why? Because in the eyes of society, Mary got pregnant by somebody else, and Joseph still decided to take her as his wife. What was supposed to be Mary's shame with a quiet divorce is now Joseph's shame. He takes that upon himself. And public and personal shame both figure into Joseph's decision to take Mary into his home. When he decides to marry her, he knows that the shame is his. He knows that he's going to be looked down upon in society because you took Mary who was with another man. And the catch is, Joseph didn't do anything wrong, right? He didn't do anything wrong at all. He's the just one. He's in a sense the victim in the whole scene. He doesn't deserve the shame, but he takes it upon himself. He chooses to do so. For us, I think, in many ways, we're very unlike Joseph. We have the law, we know what we're supposed to be doing, we can be just and righteous people, and often we do the right thing, but a lot of times we use that justice and our doing the right thing to expose other people to shame or to bring embarrassment upon them. Or sometimes we just flat out embarrass other people and bring shame upon them. It happens maybe in little situations in life. It can be, for example, at someone, husband and wife, someone compliments your wife. Oh, your wife looks so good and so young. Husband that says, well, she dyes her hair. It's really all gray. She's had a lot of surgeries. Well, those are kind of embarrassing kind of things that maybe don't need to be said, right? It's true, right? It's just, it's righteous, it's true, but it doesn't need to be said. Or again at maybe a Christmas party, your husband's so kind, bringing you a drink. Well, he had 2 for himself and 1 for me, and he drinks every day. Well, okay, that's just. It's right, it's true, but some things don't need to be said. Don't need to expose one another, especially as spouses, to any kind of embarrassment. Sometimes it's siblings that are older, recounting stories about maybe embarrassing moments in life. You told one about me in front of other people, now let me tell one about you that's maybe even more embarrassing to you. I think it happens a lot in schools as well, even in crowds of people or groups that call themselves friends, recounting a lot of embarrassing incidents, and it happens right in front of the person as well. And sometimes there's a stronger intent to embarrass one another. And at all costs, especially teenagers, I think try to avoid embarrassment. Nobody likes to be shamed. Nobody likes to be embarrassed. And sometimes we make that decision knowingly. That's not to say it's okay to tell funny stories. It's okay to some extent embarrass one another, but when the story is harmful or hurtful or not. And you know what your intention is going to be. And sometimes even in the name of humor, we embarrass people publicly, unfortunately. And so maybe it's just one lesson from today's gospel. To not be willing to expose anybody to shame, number one, but then also secondly, like Joseph, he takes it upon himself. And so maybe somebody's going to say something about you in the next couple of weeks that's a little bit embarrassing or shameful. And so can you take that upon yourself and say nothing back in return? Whether it's an explanation about why it's not true or shaming somebody a little bit more than you were embarrassed yourself, can you take that? Can you turn the other cheek? Like Joseph does in the gospel. There will be some opportunities, I'm sure, during the next couple of weeks, certainly over the months and the years that come in our lives. But it's good for us to imitate Joseph in every aspect. It's good that we're just and we're righteous. It's good that we adhere to the truth. But it's also nice if we can choose not to embarrass other people and at times to take some of that shame and embarrassment upon ourselves.